If you've been rummaging through the Guild Wars 2 subreddit lately, then you'll know that there's been a bit of a scuffle between some developers and the community. It all began with a string of tweets posted by Jessica Price, who is part of the narrative team over at ArenaNet, the studio behind Guild Wars 2. Things began innocently enough with her expressing her personal opinions about why she believes it's not possible to make a player character for an MMORPG interesting. Now, her string of tweets is basically like a mini essay that goes on for like 29 posts, so I'm not gonna read it or even attempt to summarize her point of view, but she had some insights she wanted to share about RPG protagonists, and she got it off her chest. So far, so good. In response to her string of tweets, a Twitter user going by the name of Darius, who is a Guild Wars 2 player and YouTuber, respectfully disagreed with her point of view and expressed his own thoughts about the topic. Notice how he begins by complimenting Jessica, stating that her string of tweets was an interesting read, and it's very clear that throughout his response, he maintains a very friendly and polite tone. After sharing his piece, he closes his own string of tweets with a very kind, "Nonetheless, I appreciate the insightful thread." There is no denying that Darius had no hostile intentions here. He merely seeked to engage in discussion and provide some feedback from a fan to developer. Jessica, however, didn't take kindly to someone courteously disagreeing with her, responding with a very passive-aggressive, "Thanks for trying to tell me what we do internally, my dude." Darius then calmly and directly responded with, "You getting mad at my obvious attempt at creating dialogue and discussion with you, instead of just replying that I'm wrong or otherwise correct me in my false assumptions, is really just disheartening. You do you though, I'm sorry if it offended, I'll leave you to it." Once again, I'd like to note that Darius has been very respectful about his dialogue throughout this entire exchange, while being honest about his own opinions. From there, Jessica Price took her attack against Darius to another level by retweeting the first part of Darius' polite retort and adding the following message. "Today, in being a female game dev, allow me, a person who does not work with you, explain to you how you do your job." Yeah, bafflingly, out of the blue, Jessica somehow steered the conversation and made it about sexism when all Darius was doing was engaging in discussion. It had nothing to do with her being a male or female, he simply wanted to give his own 2 cents to someone who is part of the narrative team over at ArenaNet, someone who has influence over Guild Wars 2's narrative experience. Another Twitter user aptly responded to Jessica by stating that Darius' comments don't read like someone trying to claim they know better, but rather someone who's simply trying to express their opinion. Jessica responded to that with, "Ask yourself why he felt the need to do that, though." To that, another Twitter user came in Darius' defense by simply responding with, "Because you're part of the narrative team," which has since garnered close to 600 likes. Earlier that day, Jessica had also posted a separate tweet that reads as follows. "As an amateur fantasy writer, I would like to tell you, a professional fantasy writer, maybe listen to yourself and stop right there, my dude." So right out of the gate, pretty aggressive comment about amateur writers, as if to insinuate they have nothing to offer. Hence why Twitter user MMO Inks respectfully asked her, "While it's odd that they would classify themselves and you as such, it's possible they still have or had valuable criticism?" From there, this thread quickly devolved into Jessica rudely telling this user to go away. She talked about how he was being inconsiderate of the kind of treatment women in the gaming industry deal with, and finally, when MMO Inks respectfully tried to elaborate on what his intentions were with his response, she simply scoffed him off with, "Sure, dude, now get out of my fucking feed with your assumptions and your entitlement to my time." She didn't just stop there, though. Her unprofessionalism continued the next day when she once again attacked Darius' feedback, which involved his thoughts on branching dialogue, by tweeting this. "Like the next rando asshat who attempts to explain the concept of branching dialogue to me, as if, you know, having worked in game narrative for a fucking decade, I have never heard of it, is getting insta-blocked, PSA. Finally, Peter Fries, another member of ArenaNet's narrative team, came to Jessica's defense when a Twitter user pointed out how it's easy for people to side with Darius on this one when he was disparaged for politely offering his thoughts, and denounced how Jessica kept playing the gender card when it had nothing to do with the conversation. To that, Peter Fries had this to say. "Here's a bit of insight that I legitimately hope he reflects on. She never asked for his feedback. Then, when another user questioned the notion that feedback can't be offered in a public forum like Twitter, especially to developers of a game, Peter responded with, "These are our private social media accounts. Imagine you're an astronomer and you start sharing some things you've learned in the last few months since you began a research project observing Saturn, only to have observation techniques explained to you by a layman." Another user then reiterated how Twitter is a public site, that Guild Wars 2 is a public game, and that when a dev offers input in public forums, passionate players are expected to respond, particularly noting how in this case, criticism was delivered in a constructive and inoffensive way, with Jessica unprofessionally resorting to conflating the discussion to a completely different issue. It didn't take long for the Guild Wars 2 community to very quickly pick up on these developers' unprofessional behavior and attacks against the community and stand up to defend their fellows, with one post highlighting what's been happening, having gained over 6,600 upvotes already. Now, it would seem as though word has gotten around to the higher-ups over at ArenaNet. The day after Jessica posted her derogatory responses on July 4th, the following day on July 5th, ArenaNet president Mike O'Brien posted the following message on the Guild Wars 2 official forums. "Recently, 2 of our employees failed to uphold our standards of communicating with players. Their attacks on the community were unacceptable. As a result, they are no longer with the company. I want to be clear that the statements they made do not reflect the views of ArenaNet at all. As a company, we always strive to have a collaborative relationship with the Guild Wars community. We value your input. We make this game for you." Mike O'Brien. Well, goddamn, talk about swift justice. A deliberation that members of the Guild Wars community greatly appreciated, judging by these close to 8,000 upvotes and counting. So here's all I'll say about the matter, speaking directly to Jessica. Look, nobody's denying that sexism and toxic behavior exists on social media. Nobody's denying that women have been treated unjustly in the workplace. I haven't lived in your shoes, so I won't dare to assume what your life's been like, what you've been through, and what sort of abusive or toxic behavior you've had to endure. But when we isolate your life to this particular situation where you shared in a public forum extensive thoughts and details on a game you're involved in as a developer, the way you reacted as someone who represents the gaming company you are a part of was plain and simply wrong. This Derar fellow did nothing but very politely express his point of view to someone he thought he could have an interesting discussion with, someone who is involved in the game he loves to play and wants to see improve. But for whatever reason, you took that personally and turned what could have been a pleasant and insightful back and forth into something ugly, proceeding to attack someone who is a member of your community, of your game. There's simply no excuse that justifies the kind of backlash you gave Derar for the tactful criticism and feedback he provided, especially given your position. Now, you could argue that you weren't asking for anyone's opinion, and that's fine, but why make your Twitter profile public then? If you merely wish to express yourself to your acquaintances, why not set your profile to private so only people you know can follow you? I get the sense that you are fully aware of the kind of public forum that Twitter is, and you seem to be perfectly content with accepting feedback that agrees with you, while harshly denouncing and shunning those who don't see eye to eye with you before resorting to playing the gender card out of the blue when the situation doesn't call for it. To be clear, I'm not downplaying gender issues or sexism. All I'm saying is that the topic played no part in this particular exchange. Absolutely nothing about Derar's tweets warranted the conversation to shift in that direction. I mean, there's really not much else to say except that Mike O'Brien made the right call here. No company should excuse one of their employees publicly debasing customers, especially when the customer did absolutely nothing wrong. I'm all for developers being open, receptive, and communicative. I'm all for developers being able to defend themselves and tell their side of things, but what we saw here with Jessica wasn't communication. It was just poisonous disrespect to members of her community, to players of her game. Anyway, I'm glad that the issue was ultimately resolved swiftly, as I did feel like this debacle was festering into something bigger. And I must say, good on ArenaNet for not burying this under the carpet and waiting the storm out, but rather resolving this issue directly and head on. These are just one man's thoughts and opinions anyway. I'd love to hear what your take is on this situation in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy my content and would like to support this channel directly, consider donating on Patreon. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.